Hey everyone. Um, Pretty late here. I think it's almost 12 at night. I have school tomorrow. Again, weekend's over for me now, obviously. But I was sitting here, awake as I normally am, reading this book. Finally, some good news by Delicious Tacos. Um, it's a pretty short book. I've been reading it slowly though. There was this one moment, the second chapter, that I was thinking about. There's this character who basically lives in debt, essentially. Then he's saving up money to be able to pay off all of these loans that he has to pay off each month, whilst being able to retain a lifestyle at home for 6 months. Um, and in that specific chapter, he just turns 40. But it describes like how few things he owns, and it describes the kind of like weird, whimsical, depressing uh, nature that his existence is. That like at that age, his car is probably going to break down by the time he has it paid off. Um, but unrelated to the contents of the book and what it's about, I started thinking about this idea of doing anything to be able to get some form of isolation somehow, whilst also living in very minimalistic conditions. I was watching Red's new video a couple days ago where he was talking about living minimalistically. So he was going to all these stores and buying like beans and stuff so he could eat that way. And I was thinking about this. How much exactly would I put in to be able to live this way? And I was especially thinking about it a lot because Wise had put out this video in response to the video I made about why I would never get married. Um, and a lot of the sentiment that he had put in there was, well, can't really trust anything Star says about this topic because it's just going to move in the other direction anyway. And I think that's a kind of peculiar consequence of spending as much time on the internet as I do, making as many videos as I do, because as I'm learning new things and as the thought processes are changing, I also present, different worldviews and ways of doing things as I learn new things, as I admit, things that might be withdrawn for the purpose of a lot of it, at least in the past, purposes of having some form of control. I don't reveal this secret about myself or don't reveal this motive because other people will become distrusting as a result of hearing it. I don't care so much anymore, but there's still that lingering sense in the background. And so, when that many contradictions exist, what motivation do you have exactly to not read into a person whatever narrative you want? I mean, when you've heard all of these different worldviews from this one person, you can essentially just say whatever you want about them. Oh, I choose with this version of Star's history because it makes the most sense to me. I choose this version of Star's history because that's what I want. And it's almost like no matter how much evidence I give, no matter how many years I go back to, no matter how much time I've thought about it, no matter how consistent it's been, nothing I say is going to disprove what other people have to say about it. And this is something I do a lot now, is I give numbers when I'm talking about specific topics. I'll say, this many years ago, I became conscious of this thing, or I've had this whole thing my whole life. I have to do that all the time now, because the things that I say, and this has always happened for me, so I just kind of embraced it. Like, I used to be much, much more consistent, and I still got this line of thinking that, oh, well, you're just going to change your mind, so you're wrong, you know. And eventually I just stopped caring, and I stopped trying to be consistent because I was never going to be understood by those people anyway. And so I just kind of let whatever idea into my head, and then depending on if it worked at the time, I used that. But now that I've tried to draw a through line through all of my work, and I've tried to give examples through all of my work of the consistencies, now it's a problem. You know, now it's over-narrativizing, now it's can't understand that because it's a lie, and what do I say to something like that other than I disagree and it's not true? There's really nothing you can say. It doesn't matter how much evidence you give, you're always going to be considered the one who's wrong, because the other person has a certain view that they want you to embody, you know. They have a certain line of advice that they want you to follow. You know, just go to the gym, bro. Just fall in love, bro. That's what you need. Just fall in love, bro. Notwithstanding the fact, there are other people like me who have existed all throughout history, who've had the same opinions, relatively speaking, who have been more or less healthy, or have gotten through. And some of them have made great things as a result of it. It's like, I know this video was meant to be about some kind of consistency, but there's really nothing that I can do. Like, I give examples all throughout the history of my channel. I give examples before that. And it's pretty consistent stuff. Like, these aren't even things I've necessarily contradicted. Like, okay, if you go back to a podcast I did in, like, 2017, I guess, or later 2017, I guess early 2018, this idea, oh, I want to be a teacher because I want to help people or something, that's the closest thing that I can find. And back then, that was, in some sense, I guess, genuinely true. But if you go soon after I do another podcast with a friend where we have a conversation and he was like, you know, hey, Digibro did all this stuff when he was in the same grade, and he said, oh yeah, I'm gonna get super into academia and that's what I'm gonna do. And then he told me, hey, I did that same thing at that same grade, and both of us ultimately figured out that it wasn't for us. And I think you're going to go down that path. And I said, no, I'm definitely not. I love people, love the idea of academics, love the idea of being a teacher. So I put in everything that I could into that pursuit. What do you know? I had the opposite result. I didn't like it. And it got into a point where I had to admit that I didn't like it. And there were other podcasts that I did afterwards where I said that. I think I've been very, very consistent in saying that if I had a job, I would want it to be on my own terms. In the very least, even in those contexts where I'm talking about, oh, I must be a teacher to help others and all this other nonsense, I said I wanted to live my own way. And that the only way I would, you know, become a teacher was much, much later in life when I was, quote-unquote, settling down from the internet. Which is like years away. I don't know how I would be able to predict something that specific, but that's what I was saying at the time. To give, like, a source that much credibility from, you know, that many years ago, when it so blatantly contradicted what I felt soon after, and have continued to feel, and that those feelings themselves reflect, you know, the majority of feelings that I had when I was very young and onward. It's only those couple isolated incidences that you can cite, those very few. And then I did try to expand upon them and become a normie, and it didn't work, and I didn't like it. why are people not allowed to just not like things? That's what I misunderstand. Why are people not allowed to have their own experience on their own issues? And it's one thing to cite contradictions, but to not cite the context surrounding them and the time period in which they exist, and to act as if you're, some kind of an authority on them. In some sense, I think it's a little bit disrespectful, because it's not like you have the entire body of information. You're just kind of taking shots in the dark and saying, I have a much better opinion than you on your life. And it was for that reason that when I was reading this when I was reading this book, the thought came back into my head. And there really is nothing I can do to be understood. It doesn't matter, how much context I give. It doesn't matter how much I explain. It doesn't matter if I give the time periods for everything I say. And then, I could make a chart. I could go back through all of my videos, all of my journals, and I could make a chart, point by point, of the consistencies, and it wouldn't do anything. I would still get the same comments telling me, Star, you absolutely need this romantic bullshit, and, you're going against human nature, and you don't understand yourself, and you're delusional, or whatever. And it's people like me experience this all the time. Like, I put up with it because I don't particularly care very much, and I think that people who say these things have good intentions, but, I think people like me who have to listen to this stuff all the time, I think it just drives them more mad, because they don't quite, they don't quite know how to express themselves, to the extent that they end up, they end up just not trying anymore, and they feel defeated, because part of the reason why they express it is because they want to feel like someone understands them, and whether or not that can be at the detriment of potential self-improvement, I think, sometimes a risk. I think believing the person, though, is usually more important. It's more important to believe the person, because the negative outcomes from not believing them, I think, are stronger than the ones that happen if they are quote-unquote delusional and then realize that they're wrong eventually. Which obviously I've shown the capacity to do. So, I don't know. It's one of these late night thoughts. I'm gonna keep reading this book.